it's hard taking that type of love, right? It's love at the end of the day. And I don't think I understood it growing up. I thought it was just her being mean, her just having an attitude that day. Her hair wasn't right. She mad at me. Like, it could have been all those things, but very much not thinking about how she was holding that as a person. And then when you talk about the patterns and how that trickles down from family, I remember my grandmother treated her the same way, but she still showed up with her shining armor every single time, just as I saw my grandmother do with my great grandmother. And so it's this pattern, it's this passing on that we do innately. You know, it's again a survival tactic, and it does come at a price, like you said. And the risk is ourselves and the generations we're trying to build after us.
So we've been talking about trauma. And so you came at such a great time, because I know that you're going to bring such rich voice to this space around this. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is trauma can show up in many different ways. But what I want to talk about on this episode is that there's so much that happens at home and in the community that happens outside of school that children bring into the classroom with them. I'm so excited that you are here with us, Artinese. And I want to start by first you just telling us a little bit of who you are, what you do, and why you're passionate about this work.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, I'm Artinese Myrick. I am now the Deputy Director of Live Free Illinois, a faith-based organization geared towards ending mass incarceration, gun violence, police violence, and providing healing justice. I do this work because I come from a family of Black women trailblazers who I've seen go through just tumultuous times with a smile on their face, with a cape on, and really never knew that they were the ones who were still crafting the guidebook while trying to parent and raise a family full of kids who didn't know where they were going. And so I do this work to be a solutionist. I don't want to see other Black women, other Black families have to go through times of uncertainty without really having the tools to navigate through that. And so I really believe in doing policy work to build better infrastructure for our families that actually impacts and reflects us and our needs in Black communities, so that way we can thrive and be successful and healthy and well. So I do this work for the Black women trailblazers and families like mine, because I think we all deserve better and our communities deserve better.
And, you know, and one thing I say is when you know better, you do better. And just hearing you talk, it made me just think about, because so often, like, we as women, we do so much, right? And we carry so much on us. And particularly women of color, we have to wear the cape, right? We have to be the mom, the person on the job, you know, the person in charge of everything, making it happen. And so often we're not, you know, putting our mask on first for ourselves. And so we're being and doing for everyone, but not really healing within ourselves. And so what that does is then the trauma that we're not addressing trickles down to our families. And then that causes them to in turn repeat some of the same cycles and have some of the same issues that we are struggling with as women.
That's great.
So what I want you to talk about is, what does it look like when caregivers or family members are navigating their own trauma and the impact that may have on their children or children within their presence?
I think it feels like a mixture of survival and self-sacrifice. When I think about the things my mother had to do in order to make sure I was safe, to make sure that I was fed, to make sure I was getting to point A to point B, that took a lot of her strategizing. It took a lot of her being hard on us because she knew what was up against us and our families, but also self-sacrifice. I don't think I even looked at my mother as a woman until I was about 22 years old.
Child, my daughter, I'm nothing to her, for real.
What are you doing other than being my mom, right?
Exactly.
And I didn't realize it. I think that was 22 years too long. I think I only thought about what she was doing for me, the role she was playing for me, my grandmother, my brothers, my dad. And she never got the chance to just show up as herself. And I think with that, the impact it had on me is I had a lot of pressure on myself that wasn't needed. I didn't want her to have to endure those things alone. But also because of her, I knew things were possible. So I wanted to be the best I could. And it put a lot of pressure on me. I also think she was a little bit harder than me than on my brothers. I'm the youngest of three, two amazing older brothers. But I also think she also saw what my grandmother went through, my great grandmother, and she was a single mother with my dad in and out of jail, both of my dad's stepfather and father, and herself also being in jail. So she wanted to do anything she could to mother us. My mother mothered me from the prison phone. My mother made sure that no matter where she was going to be there. And I think because of the self-sacrifice that I saw her in the way the system even impacted the way she had to navigate, I really wanted to be the best I could be for her.
You know, one, that is such a beautiful story that you just shared with us about your life and your experiences. And it made me think about, to your point of the sacrifice and not even thinking, right? That this is a real person with real feelings. And it shows that when you care for somebody, you put yourself on the back burner so that they can shine. And when you said like the pushing of you, right? But that did something to you, right? That did something to you. And it resonated with me because my story is similar to your story in the sense that I was raised by a single mom, and she put a lot of pressure on us because she knew what she had to endure and what her sisters and her mother endured and what it takes to be successful. But that comes at a price. So I couldn't be so free and, careless with my life. I couldn't do all the fun things that other kids were doing. And I resented her a little bit for that. And she passed on, but I can say where you said, like, I didn't even see her or even get a chance to say, like, thank you. Like, I'm at a different place now raising my daughter, but I had resentment a little bit because I was like, I can't do nothing.
Right.
I can't go outside.
Right.
Like, what?
Get off my back.
Like, I gotta be this. But it showed up. And I think I have to catch myself because I'm doing that same thing to my daughter. You gotta do this. We gotta do this. Like, you gotta get this. We got, and that puts pressure and that puts trauma. And I think a little bit of that, what I experienced, chipped away at my freedom, to just be free and to just be me. I felt like I had to fit in this box a little bit, right? So
I think I agree with you 100%. It's hard taking that type of love, right? It's love at the end of the day. And I don't think I understood it growing up. I thought it was just her being mean, her just having an attitude that day. Her hair wasn't right. She mad at me. Like, it could have been all those things, but very much not thinking about how she was holding that as a person. And then when you talk about the patterns and how that trickles down from family, I remember my grandmother treated her the same way, but she still showed up with her shining armor every single time, just as I saw my grandmother do with my great grandmother. And so it's this pattern, it's this passing on that we do innately. It's again a survival tactic, and it does come at a price, like you said, and the risk is ourselves and the generations we're trying to build after us.
This is such rich conversation because not all trauma looks like crisis, right? So we're talking about what we felt being pressed down on us from our mothers. But one other piece I want to bring into this space is there's community. And I know that when I was growing up, we lived in a middle-class neighborhood, before my parents got divorced. But then after the divorce, we moved to the inner city. And if I thought what my mother was doing to me in this middle-class neighborhood, we couldn't really do too much. Honey, when we got into the city, I couldn't go outside because there was, shooting and, fighting and all of that around our home. We lived in the heart of, the happenings in the city, which a lot of our kids do here in Chicago, right? And so just seeing some of that, being exposed to some of that from a young child into adulthood, what impact do you see that's having on our kids? And they're living with that. They're bringing that into the classrooms with them.
How you practice is how you play, right? The things that you learn, you take it with you. You try to dish it out as it came to you. And I think that's a lot of the responsiveness that I felt when I was a young child. I remember, again, my mother I think she raised on good values, home training, if you will.
Yeah.
But going to school, fights, you gotta stick up for yourself. You have to do what you have to do. And it may be in conflict of what I felt that I was learning and what was valued at home, but I had to do what I had to do outside. And because of that may not, when I come back to the house or my mother's getting phone calls or even interacting with other children, right? When there's a conflict, how do we actually meet those, right? And how do we do that with intention and not with how those environmental factors are actually impacting us.
And one thing that made it interesting to me is, and even I started seeing this when I became a teacher and was working in the classroom, like a child would come into the classroom and say, "Miss McKinley, such and such is dead." And I'm like, "What?" And they say it like, nothing. And that's death. And a 3 and a 4-year-old just speaking to it like it's insignificant. And I think that's what teachers, we have to help children unpack that. Sometimes they see it so much, it doesn't even feel real. And they start to normalize it. And then when they start to normalize death, what does that do to the relationships that they're having, not only with peers, but with their families? How are they at such a young age able to unpack that? And how can we help them, once they get into our buildings? Because all of this is happening outside.
That's right. I think my first encounter, I remember I was in college and I used to take in a lot of just my colleagues and peers because we needed space together. We needed community. And I remember having a conversation with a young man in my living room. We're studying, getting ready to go to one of the social events. And he was only 19. I think I was 22 at the time. And he said, if I go today, I'd be okay. And I was astounded. I said, what? Like, there's so much life has to offer. But again, when death becomes a normalcy and when you have to cope with that, you might shut that down, right? You might have to do what you feel. You might have to have those numb feelings. And I felt that he had those numb feelings. And I was really able to talk to him to learn that he had seen so many people pass away, all of his friends, his cousins. And so it was a way of life, unfortunately. Now, looking at him, he's doing great. He has a child. He's been experiencing life. But at that time, the fact that he couldn't see value because of all the death that was around in his environment, it was devastating. And I was young and didn't understand it myself and thought we all had a lot more life to live.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, when they see it in the neighborhood every day, every weekend, think about all the things that happen in the summer in Chicago. Like, we have to be able to talk with our kids about what they see and what they experience and really speak life into them, because otherwise they will be that 19-year-old young man who feels like, if I go today, I'm fine. And we should not honor that and want to live in that way. All right, so we were talking about the young man from your college experience who felt like if at 19, right, he could go, he would be fine. And it made me think about the young kid in my classroom that came to me and said, such and such a died yesterday, with no emotion and no context. I think when we think about that and we think about the society of where children live and what they experience, and then how that shows up to the child or the man that they are in front of us or in our places, we have to not judge, right? Because sometimes we can say, oh, they're angry, right? They're angry, or they got an attitude, or they acting up, right? But we don't know the cause and the hidden trauma behind it. And so that's why you never judge. You always seek to understand. And I think that's what we as educators, I think we as family members, we family, I'm talking directly to you in the circle, we have to do better, to learn each other and really help each other. And, one thing that's a stigma in our community is therapy and getting help. And we have to, debunk that myth. It's critically important. If that young man had gotten help prior to him going to college, he would have saw the full potential of life like you did. Now, grateful things worked out for him and he's doing well. But even with our little ones, who see death every day, we have to let them know that's not the life. There's so much more life out there for you. And some of them are just saying, if I can make it to 18. No, baby. We want you to make it to be 118, exactly.
That's right.
So there's so much work to do in this space of trauma. And we're going to continue to talk about it because I'm devolving so many episodes to kind of talk about it in different ways and how it shows up. So in this episode, we talked a little bit about therapy and really started heading into the direction of social emotional learning. So when you think about that, what is your take on social emotional learning in young learners and how critically important is that?
I think it's important because I think it's comprehensive. I believe we do have to be able to look at it, the way the child is showing up socially, in their emotional well-being, their self-identity. How are all of those parts, social responsibility, how are all those parts coming together for children? But I think the problem is culturally, some of us, when we talk about capacity and we talk about families and we may not have the opportunity to do all of the above, right? And so maybe focusing more so on the social identity part, being self-aware, being learning who they are, or maybe not even enough of that. So a child may grow up feeling like they don't know themselves and and may not have someone to back that with that confidence, that love, that tenderness that it takes. But I think it is a helpful tool for us to be able to say, how do we comprehensively look at the tools that we can build inside of our children and help to see what we can do to strengthen that. But I think sometimes, again, it's difficult to balance all of it, to balance the whole concept of it all.
Yeah, I think about, just in the classroom, you see so many children, so many needs. And a lot of times teachers need to be trained in that, right? So they need to be trained to recognize what children need and honor, too, how they show up in spaces. So when we think about social emotional learning, we know it's critically important. And we know that there's a lot of training that needs to happen to ensure that we're putting the right environment in place for children to thrive and be successful. But what do you see as the challenge when children are told to regulate, but not really taught how to self-regulate their selves or their emotions?
I think it turns more into behavior management, if you will. When you say just do as I say, not as I do, without that understanding, a child especially needs to know the severity of why. Why are you telling me to do this? Why is this good for me? How is this good for those who are around me? What can I learn? I think without that context, it's, again, feeling like behavior management. And then that way, a child might have defensiveness about even learning and taking in those cues to do so. So I don't think that without really... And I think that's what also just helped me. Like when I was told and given the opportunity to understand something, it's like, oh, okay, then I can kind of think about it in a way that works for me as well and say, okay, I feel that I could trust this process. So I think it's more about and not just buy-in, but collective buy-in on a concept that will better have benefit for me or for the child in that way. And so if not, I think it's behavior management without that context.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that's how we're moving in education. We're shifting, right? Before, when I'm probably older than you. Before it was kind of like, do as I say, right? Follow me. Like, because I said so. That was the answer that you got every time you asked, well, why? Because I said so. Okay, well, that's not working with these kids now. They want to know the why, which rightfully so, right? They want to know the why. They want to know and should know, right? How is this beneficial to me? And I think it goes back to what I said in a previous episode around modeling, the importance of modeling the behaviors that you want to see and talking through that, because it helps them when you're not there. Right? When nobody's there to say, get over it, when nobody's there to say, figure it out, at least we're teaching them and they have the coping skills to be able to do it for themselves. And that's what you really want.
Not when they say, well, trust the process. I can't do that unless I understand the why behind it. And again, I think it goes, like you said, when no one's there, that will kick in. It's because that understanding and the buy-in. I love that you said that.
And because they see the results, right? So once they do it and they experience it and it's helpful, then they're more likely to do it again.
That's right.
Yeah.
And feel comfortable practicing that, making mistakes around that as well.
Yep. All right, Artinese, this is my favorite game. Did you play this game as a kid? Red light, green light?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. This is my favorite game. Okay, so what we do here in the circle, we play the game, but it's a myth buster. Because a lot of times we hear things and it's not the truth, right? And so this game helps us to demystify things that we think we know, but it's also an opportunity for us to bring awareness and clarity to things that are truth. And so we're going to play this game today. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and then we're going to use these paddles to say, yes, this is true, or no, it's not. Okay. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so here's the first question. Again, we demystifying and speaking truth here now. SEL should be taught the same way in every classroom because kids need consistency.
Yeah.
Why did you say no? Why is that a myth?
I don't think it's cookie cutter for everyone, right? I think when we're helping our children grow, we have to have a tailored approach. Each child is different. Each environment that the child is in is different. And so it needs to be tailored to their needs, to what they truly can benefit from. And that means focusing in on them and not giving them the same, everyone's a different puzzle piece, right? And so you can't use the same infrastructure with every child.
That's so true. And that's kind of what I did. Like within the district, we have over 300 plus, schools that offer pre-K programming. And if I said, everybody got to teach it this way, now you can use the same curriculum, but it can be modified, right? And adjusted for the child and the students. Every community, all of the 77 communities across the city are different. And they need different things and different approaches. So, yep, we're in agreement. That's why I said, nope, that's not true. That's a myth.
Yep.
All right, ready for the next question? All right, healing-centered SEL teaches adults how to regulate too.
I'm going to say yes. Green.
Why did you say it's green?
I think everyone needs the tools, right? If something's going to work, we all have to practice it together. Our adults have to, like you mentioned before, model it, and also learn. One of the greatest healers I know, her name is Jasmine James, the Trauma Zone, where she focuses on making sure that the parents as well as the students are learning and identifying the triggers together, identifying coping mechanisms together, so that it's everyone's lock in step, but also learning with one another. And I think it helps to create a healthy, healthy boundaries, but also healthy tools to be able to understand what that trauma looks like as well.
I love that. And yeah, I totally agree. And I love the piece of bringing the family into it too. So yes, teachers need to learn so that they can be that model, so that they can provide the right structures and systems and boundaries and supports for kids. But when we can bridge that home school connection and start having conversations together as a triad, as a team, student, family, teacher, like that's when real success happens, right? That's when we see the game changes for how students are thinking about their trauma and managing their trauma.
And at the end of the day, all of our healing is connected. I think our healing, our liberation is all connected, and we can't do that without one another. And if we're all able to do this as one, I think it's going to help our community as a greater whole.
I agree. All right, here's our last question. If a child seems too young to talk about trauma, we should wait until they get older. I say no.
I think I'm kind of in the middle.
Okay, tell me why.
So I think sometimes growing up, like my parents or my uncles, their aunties were going through things, so they would like bring me in on it. I'm like, I don't know what do I do with this?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like we learn these things also too late. I don't think I recognized trauma and had a word to put to it until I was 24. I remember going to a law enforcement conference with Marcia Thompson. She's a Black lawyer. And she said, she described trauma like she used the analogy of a belt. And she used that as a way, I was familiar what a belt looked like and what it was used for, to behavior manage, if you will. And she talked about, it wasn't, someone was walking with the wind, and the wind brought them back to hearing the wind come back from a belt. And she said the wind was trauma, not the belt. It was the wind was the trauma trigger. And I said, whoa, like I never knew about it. Yeah. So then I learned about triggers. I learned about how those, I think the example was I remembered that, but I think that it was too late, right? If I had a way to learn and understand what ticked me off or how to self-regulate because I knew I can identify those things a little sooner, I think I would have been in a much more, in a better mental space as an adult. And so, but I do think we have to be cognizant, right? We do have to make sure that kids are protected and safe while having these conversations, and that we're debunking these things, but also making sure that mental health in these conversations aren't just taboo, and making sure that they're normal in our communities. But I think we do have to be conscientious about the timing and when it comes to children.
Yeah. And I'm not saying, hey, when they come out the womb, start talking, right? I'm thinking more of like, around when they start to recognize their feelings, right? And I think, that sweet spot may be 3, somewhere around there where they can talk and share and, express themselves and really understand at a micro level, like what's happening, right? And so I think it's about the things of putting words to meaning. Sad, that's where it starts, like sad, happy, excited, and those are all feelings. And so then when you start to recognize when are you having these feelings, and then what's making you have these feelings, right? That's when I'm saying like that at a young age, because that gets to what you're saying, like, had I known this about triggers and things, but what I just described is a way to start thinking about what's causing you to feel that way. That could be a trigger, right? And so, yeah, so that's why I said, I think, we can start earlier with it, because I think we can start by teaching them some of the vocabulary, right, around trauma and what it means. So they may not necessarily understand it. And I love your analogy of the belt, because sometimes growing up in the household that I grew up in, that belt means something that can be traumatic.
Right.
And so, but we gave the definition earlier in, I think, one of our other sessions, like trauma is, what you think about when something happened to you, and it's your body's like reaction to it. So hearing that wind, right? Thinking about that belt, right? It's traumatic for folks. And sometimes just even seeing the belt is traumatic, right? It may not necessarily be the wind. But yeah, so that's very important. This has been such a great conversation. And what's really coming up for me is SEL without community context is not helpful. And so we have a transition as we close out our segment. I give families a take-home folder. And so what I want to allow you to do is being our guest today and sharing so much valuable information with us is to give families a reminder, give them something to do. And then I'll come back and I'll give them a homework.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. If families and communities can walk away with anything during this conversation, I think do not be afraid to approach mental health and wellness in their communities. I would like to shout out to our community healing resource centers, which are trauma-informed centers that are within the communities that they serve. So, and they're also staffed by the people living in the community.
Oh, I love that.
Their whole purpose is to educate communities on what trauma looks like, educate so that mental health isn't taboo. And so this helps us to have normal conversations. But again, they're in 10 communities across the state in Illinois, and we have people who are trusted, who have lived experience and also have the training to educate communities where they are. So it's a go model. They're meeting communities where they're at. And so I want to encourage people to figure out, where are your local resources? Where are your local places where you can go and get your strength and get your healing? And it doesn't have to be you going off to a retreat for 7 days. It can be taking that breath for a moment.
That's not bad, though.
I encourage that as well. But take that breath, take that breather, go have those conversations, go in those healing spaces, whatever works for you. But try something. Don't be afraid to be able to bet on yourself and get what you need for you, your family, and your children to feel better and get the healing justice that we deserve.
I love that you said, I think what resonated with me, and y'all, I'm gonna get to the homework. But I think what resonated for me is that they're staffed with people from community. When we think about trauma and we think about how personal it is, you really you don't feel comfortable just talking to anybody or saying, but sometimes I know for us, when we think about our application and how we get students enrolled in schools, it's always because somebody in the community, a trusted voice, right? And so I love that these centers are staffed with people in the community, and they're trained because they can say, I see what you see. I've walked where you walk. I've experienced what you've experienced. And you feel a little more comfortable talking to somebody that you know can relate. It's almost like teachers love to learn from other teachers. It's that same type of model. I love it.
Absolutely.
All right. So homework, guys. I think for you, family, I want you to tell me what is bubbling up for you. As we've talked about, SEL and trauma and the community impacts, make sure you share that. I want them to share that with as many people as they can. And I want my family to also subscribe and join us in the chat, leave comments, and also join us back here in the circle. We're going to continue to talk trauma. Thank you so much for being here today. It has been a joy talking with you, Artinese.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye, y'all.